This man had an accident while chopping down trees, which resulted in his wife's right arm being pinned under a large tree. The husband wanted to extract it, but any attempt caused his wife to scream in pain. If this continued, she would lose too much blood and die. However, there was no one in the remote forest who could help them in the short term. Looking at the axe on the ground, the husband finally made a decision. He swung the axe down on his wife's right hand.
Please, no!
Heather was once the most beautiful woman in the town. To maintain her beauty, she always spared no expense on expensive jewelry. Although her husband was just a lumberjack, he always satisfied her various extravagant demands. But the sudden accident shattered this beauty. Seeing her incomplete right arm in the mirror, Heather angrily punched and shattered the mirror. Her physical deformity affected her normal life, but the change in her psychology was even more severe. She feared she was no longer the most beautiful woman in the village, and her husband would no longer love her. To make his wife happy, the husband carefully prepared a prosthetic limb. However, when Heather opened the gift with great anticipation, she did not feel any joy.
It's hideous.
In the days that followed, Heather cried every night, tormenting her husband. One early morning, Heather suddenly found her husband missing. She searched and found him in the workshop, where he had stayed up all night designing a brand new prosthetic. The patterns on it were exquisitely beautiful, and Heather was instantly captivated. Unable to resist, she said,
Do you still love me?
Yes, more than anything.
Please make it out of gold.
For a carpenter, such a request is truly unreasonable. However, the husband deeply loved his wife, so he mortgaged their house and all their possessions, buying 3 blocks of gold. After 3 days of crafting, Heather finally received the golden arm she had always dreamed of. From then on, her physical deformity was no longer a weakness but a source of pride. For the beauty-loving wife, her husband willingly gave up everything to meet her demands. Little did he know that his wife's desires were like an insatiable abyss, impossible to satisfy. Eventually, the wife fell ill, and after a doctor's diagnosis, it was revealed that the gold from the prosthetic was affecting her lung health. To prevent further harm, the best solution was to remove the golden arm.
I can't take off my golden arm. Ever.
Sir, whatever she wants.
The wife's health deteriorated, and one day, she sensed her impending death. She shared her final words with her husband.
Promise me something.
Anything.
When I die, bury me with my golden arm. Promise.
Yes,
Say it.
I will bury you with your golden arm.
And a few days later, she passed away. The husband organized a grand funeral and, as per her final wish, buried the golden arm with her. Everything seemed like a fairy tale, but reality was cruel. As the economy worsened, the gold bars the husband had purchased became a heavy burden. After he lost his job, the bills for the jewelry and gold he had bought kept piling up. After careful consideration, the husband decided to retrieve his wife's golden arm from her grave. 6 months after the burial, suddenly, the wife opened her eyes. The husband quickly covered her eyes with his hand and, in a panic, grabbed an axe to strike the arm. Compared to debt collectors, the arm was much scarier. At that moment, the husband looked at his wife again, but her eyes were still fixed on him. Terrified, he hastily fled the graveyard in his car. However, as soon as he brought the golden arm back home, terrifying cries echoed from outside. It sounded like his wife's cries. Frightened, he hid inside the house, and the sounds from outside ceased. Just as he began to relax, the entire house started shaking violently, and his wife's photo fell to the ground and shattered. The husband quickly hugged the golden arm and ran upstairs. When he turned to look, he found the door open. The sound on the floor was all too familiar. The husband locked himself in the bedroom and clutched the golden arm. Outside, footsteps approached the bedroom door. He had no choice but to hand over the golden arm through the opening in the door. The terrifying sounds finally stopped. Through a crack in the door, the husband cautiously looked around and finally summoned the courage to peek his head out. However, in the next moment, an axe swung towards him. The next day, the husband and wife lay hand in hand on the bed, as if everything was as sweet as it used to be. Now, on to the second story. It revolves around a girl named Hannah who lived in an orphanage. One night, the nun in charge abruptly woke everyone up and led them through a cornfield to a bridge. Hannah didn't understand why they were here, but the nun's actions were peculiar. She used ropes to tie each girl's head and then pushed them off the bridge. Hannah tried to escape, but the nun's rope had already ensnared her.
Hannah, you're almost there.
A train in the distance was speeding toward them, and luckily, the rope around Hannah's neck wasn't tied tightly. In the final second, she narrowly escaped death as the train passed by. Many years later, the childhood nightmare still haunted Hannah's dreams. Now an adult, she couldn't forget the terrifying memories and had developed a fear of heights. At that moment, her boss called, instructing her to rush to a construction site. When Hannah arrived, she learned that there was a malfunction with a wind turbine. A superstorm was approaching in half an hour, and they had to repair